The UN administration is hoping to expand the presence of foreign scholars at Korean universities to 300,000 by the year 2027 as part of broader efforts to tackle a shrinking population and to foster a diverse and competitive workforce. So how are authorities planning to achieve this ambitious goal? What has been the response from foreign scholars? And what are the rewards and challenges of seeking higher education in Korea as experienced by foreign scholars? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Today, we delve into government plans here to promote the presence of foreign scholars at local universities. For more on this, I have Kwon Soa here in the studio with me. So, as always, welcome back.
Happy to be here. Good afternoon, Sunny.
Right. I also have Christopher Gowe, a master's degree student at Seoul National University with us. Christopher, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you too.
Right then, so let's begin with details about this ambitious plan by the Education Ministry here and its broader purpose.
Well, that ambitious plan goes by the name Study Korea 300K Project and has been announced by the Education Ministry around 2 weeks ago. So the South Korean government aims to attract 300,000 foreign students to Korean universities by 2027. And the purpose is to revitalize the local economy, boost the global competitiveness of Korean universities, and secure foreign workers in the high-tech sector. And concerning the latter, the government plans to increase the proportion of international students with master's and doctorate degrees in science and engineering to 45% by 2027 from 30% last year. So why is all of that needed? It's because in certain fields, the country is lacking workforce, and that problem only expected to grow with Korea's aging society and record low fertility rate. So this is not just about having a bigger presence of foreign students in the country, but to have them stay here, work here, and hopefully even help in tackling Korea's population decline. So getting into some of the details of what the project entails, domestic universities, provincial governments, and businesses will all be involved in this project to put their heads together to find ways to help the students settle in and find the right career path and so forth. And to do that, they will build task force teams, and special zones will be designated to foster the globalization of education in each region of the country, which should also help in filling up universities outside the metropolitan region. Service centers will be established for international scholars at Korean education centers overseas, and an easing of regulations at universities that have made it difficult to attract more foreign students has also been promised. And also, according to one report, it already had an estimate of what kind of economic benefits this project should reap. So around 4.8 trillion won or $3.6 billion is expected to be the benefits.
Right, I see. And against that backdrop then, Christopher, like I introduced at the start of this program, you are currently a foreign student here at Seoul National University. You're pursuing a master's degree program. In what field, may I ask?
Yeah, so my master's degree is in international cooperation.
Right. What was your decision? What led to your decision to pursue your studies here in Korea?
Yeah, so that was actually a pretty difficult decision for me. I had already committed to a U.S. university, and I had dead set on going to that school, but I was a bit overwhelmed by the amount of debt that I would be facing in the U.S. and my projected earnings after graduation. So just seeing the the relative disparity between those numbers gave me a lot of anxiety, and I thought that the education here is actually 1/10 of the cost of what the school that I was planning to go to, and the living cost is about 1/3. So from that aspect, it made a lot of sense. And additionally, my academic interests and my trajectory up to this point kind of led to me, in this direction. It made a lot of sense because I'm interested in, North Korea, the US-ROK alliance, and kind of Northeast Asia security issues. So this is a really great place for me to pursue those interests further. But in terms of the enrollment process for these types of schools in Korea, it is a bit daunting for someone who hasn't done it before. So there are a lot of interesting certificates that you need for documents, like the apostille process, like that can be very lengthy. So yeah, for people that are interested in pursuing a degree in Korea, like that should be done well in advance and just kind of, reading into that beforehand, because I didn't know what I was getting into, but yeah, now that I'm here, I'm glad I made this decision, so.
How long did the entire process take you to apply to the university here, the master's degree?
So I think in comparison to U.S. universities, there was quite a bit of essays in terms of like the application process. I did have to write a lot. The document certification, that can take upwards of like a month or a month and a half, but sending them back between agencies in my home country. So that was something that I wish I had started earlier. Yeah, so it does need some preparation.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, so I understand plans to expand the number of foreign scholars within the academic arena are also evident beyond borders. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Right. It seems like Korea is not the only country that is seeking internationalization of higher education. So let's take a look at neighboring Japan, which earlier this year unveiled a similar plan that aims to bring in 400,000 foreign students by 2023, while at the same time sending 500,000 Japanese students abroad. So the goal here is to have foreign scholars study and work for a long period in Japan, and for the Japanese students to get more exposure in the world and then return with a wider scope of experiences. Similar projects are also in development in Europe. The UK plans to invest 35 billion pounds, or roughly 44.6 billion US dollars, to host 600,000 foreign students by year 2030. France is aiming at a target of 500,000 students from abroad by 2027. So this is becoming a global competition, with countries and their education institutions having to come up with good strategies for students that have a wide range of places to choose from that welcome them. And currently, only 2% of international students study in Korea. And according to UNESCO statistics as of 2020, Korea ranked 13th in terms of international student share in the world, which I would say is not bad actually, but Korea is behind China and Japan. And on top is the US, followed by the UK, Australia, Germany, Canada, and France. And I mentioned earlier that similar projects like the Korean project to get 300,000 students come to Korea are currently in Japan, UK, and France, as I mentioned. And those are already those that are at the top regarding international student share.
Right, so there is room for improvement for South Korea then. And that being said then, Christopher, what would you say is a tangible merit of pursuing one's academic interests here in the country?
I think there's a strong case to be made for pursuing your academic interests in Korea. But I do think that there are certain, criteria that would be important to consider before deciding to come to Korea. Like, I think people should have an interest in this country and they should be seeking to work here. I think that's like one of the biggest benefits of graduating from a Korean university is all of those points that it's worth on a job-seeking visa. So it's going to be much easier to get employment here after getting a degree from a school here. So I think, yeah, there's certain industries and certain fields where it would definitely be beneficial. Like for my field, it makes a lot of sense. I want to improve my Korean language ability and develop my analytical skills, like looking at these issues like related to North Korea or this Northeast Asia security environment. So yeah, for certain industries and fields, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And for me, I think I'm one of them that can benefit a lot from a degree here. So,
are your courses at the university held in English or in Korean?
They are held in English, but there are some Korean language courses, and I have, I can make a decision about which ones I want to take. There is no, as far as I know from my program, there is no language requirement. So it's just like my word against theirs. Like if I feel comfortable taking a Korean language course, I'm allowed to. So I am planning on doing that. But yeah, of course. There's, you're able to do the whole degree in English if that is what you would want. Yeah.
Right, I see. So how does the government here then hope to boost its population of foreign scholars, given the competition that it faces?
Well, first, let's take a look at where the population of foreign students in Korea stands as of the latest. So Korea has developed into a go-to destination to study in the past years. Taking a look at this table here, in 2015, we had a little over 91,000 international students students in the country. And then Korea soon surpassed the 100,000 threshold. In 2019, so this was before the COVID-19 pandemic, we have reached over 160,000 students. And then you can see that there is not a huge jump between 2019 and 2022 at around 167,000, and that's because of the COVID-19 pandemic, of course. So it looks like the government is trying to almost double this number by 2027. So what does the government specifically aim to offer? First off, it's expected to offer more scholarships, especially raising the Global Korea scholarships or the GKS quota to 6,000. It was 4,543 last year. And especially for STEM students, which means those who study science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And also students from specific countries like Poland, the United Arab Emirates, India, and Pakistan will have some special scholarships as well. And that because of specific fields of interest being high in those countries, like in defense, nuclear technology, and again, STEM. The government also plans to expand Korean language institutions, but also have more lectures in English, like Christopher mentioned before. They are already offering those classes at universities that host foreign students, but some students have had experience with instructors speaking in Korean nevertheless. Now, fastening the process of earning visas and citizenships is also planned, and the government also is going to have career training programs so that these students can actually prepare for getting a job in Korea.
Right, I see. And also, Christopher, as part of efforts to appeal to a greater number of foreign scholars, there is talk about lowering, that is, or making the Korean language requirement for foreign college applicants more lenient. How do you respond to this?
I think that makes a lot of sense given the stated goals of this initiative. And I think the reason I would say that is, realistically, even if you had a very high topic score or a high Korean proficiency test score, I don't think that that necessarily means you can meaningfully engage in coursework, So I think that it makes sense to lower that. And, the flip side of that, which is what I would be concerned about, is like, let's say we have all of these new foreign scholars in here, and ultimately the goal is to have them working, in Korea eventually. So let's say that, they're less prepared to actually enter that workforce if their Korean language ability is lower. So yeah, I think like we heard previously, like increasing the number of like Korean language courses, like for the purpose of teaching Korean to these people. And that might be a healthy middle ground with this policy to address, everything they're wanting here.
And that being said, Christopher, given your experience back in the US, do you suppose there are enough Korean language centers there to accommodate or to respond to this desire or appetite for Korean language, which I have been told is rising?
Right. As far as I know, there is a very marked increase in the amount of Korean language education departments at universities across the United States. And of course, there's also independent centers that are mostly in larger cities, as far as I know, but there is such huge demand based on the global popularity of Korean pop culture that those classes are definitely much more available than in the past. So I think, yeah, the students that have started an education in another country, I'm sure that they would at least have some background in Korean if they were planning to come here. So that would be optimal.
Right, of course, good to know then. Staying with the same subject, so I believe though the call for less stringent Korean language requirement for foreign applicants, however, has led to a bit of mixed response here on the local front.
Well, both sides have reasonable arguments. For one, loosening language proficiency requirements would make it easier for foreign students to get admitted at universities, which would be of help to the government's plan of raising its international student population in the country, or maybe fasten that process. However, those who oppose more lenient criteria say that the students would struggle once they start studying and living in the country. In fact, one director in charge of international students at a university in Gyeongsangbuk-do province told a local newspaper that TOPIK, or the test of proficiency in Korean, level 4 or above is asked from their applicants. But even at that level, half are being turned down, largely due to lacking skills in both Korean and English. English probably because some of these students come from non-English speaking countries.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, Christopher, speaking entirely within your capacity as a foreign scholar here in Korea, what do you suggest personally to attract a greater number of foreign scholars here in the country? And ultimately, as you mentioned, what can be done to encourage them to stay here, to practice their trade, if I may?
Right. I think the absolutely most important thing in this regard is to make it easier for foreign students to work while they are in school here, because that has been exceedingly frustrating for me as someone who's trying to, establish myself as an employee or an employable person who would potentially like to be here long term. There's so much red tape related to visas, like the amount of hours you can work. And I can tell you, there's been several times where I have been hired by someone and we're moving through with the, onboarding process, and then something comes up with the visa and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, we can't actually move forward with this. And that's a very frustrating experience. And I know a lot of my peers have also experienced that. So of course, foreign student labor needs to be regulated to a degree, but we should be able to distinguish between what kinds of these activities are needing the more stringent regulations and which ones should be, allowed a bit more. So I think a bit more discretion on that could produce a good outcome for allowing more students to work here and establish themselves, so they can definitely keep staying here and working here.
Right, I see. And you believe that such ease in regulations, the bureaucratic red tape that you talked about, would encourage a greater number of peers like yourself to stay in the country?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Absolutely.
Right, I see. So what do current statistics tell us about the number of foreign students who choose to stay in Korea to practice their trade?
Well, let's refer to one figure by the Korean Educational Development Institute, which said as of 2022, 55.5% of international students in Korea aim for higher education after graduate school or aim to work in Korea. However, that doesn't seem to have materialized to that extent until now, because the ratio of foreign students returning home, standing at 29%, far exceeds that of those who enter another academic institution at 11% or get a job in Korea, which stands at a mere 8%. And another figure showed that 62% of foreign students who earn a PhD in Korea eventually return to their home country. So with the government's ambitious project, it needs concrete ways to make a longer stay realistic for those students. Again, as we mentioned, regarding visa, citizenship, or also guiding the way for a future career, all the things that we mentioned before.
Right, and talking about future career, Christopher, you've talked about hoping to work here in the country. Could we ask you a few personal questions regarding your future plans then? Are we thinking about work in the think tank industry here in the country upon graduation?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely something I'm considering. I feel like I've invested a lot into learning the language and trying to develop my analytical skills in this region. So I think for sure, for at least a couple years, after graduation, I would love to be able to stay here and develop my skills more. And perhaps ultimately, going back to the U.S. and marketing myself to either government or private employers there based on this experience I've had in Korea. So either way, yeah, I think working here would be a big goal of mine, and I would love to have that opportunity.
I wonder if there's...
Sorry to interrupt. I can imagine you sitting right there, not as a student, but as an expert in a few years from now.
Talking to us about the analysis of North Korea's situation.
Exactly.
And talking about that, Christopher, could you explain a bit about the reason behind your interest in North Korea-related affairs?
Right. Sure. So I actually came here as an exchange student, not knowing whether I was going to be super interested in that, or wanting to specialize in it. But at the time, it was during the Trump administration, there was a lot of missile testing going on and a lot of news events. And through my experience here, and also in the U.S. actually, through my coursework, we were able to explore these issues in a way that I had never thought about before. And it's just obviously it's been a really difficult, enduring security issue that the U.S. has had to grapple with. So I felt like if I tried to make a difference somehow or did some research that was of some benefit, that would be a worthwhile thing for me to do. So that's why I'm focusing on that.
Right, I see. Christopher, thus far, how long have you been here for? About a year then, is it? Or?
Well, including the time as an exchange student, I've been here for about 2.5 years now.
Right,
yeah.
And based on that, what have been some of the gains of undertaking a master's degree program here in the country, and what have been some of the challenges?
Right. Well, for sure, like I said, getting those extra points on the visas, like, once you graduate, that's one of the biggest merits of it. But in terms of like the actual attending the school and those classes, the biggest benefit I would say is a lot of different perspectives, especially regional and Korean perspectives that I wouldn't have been exposed to if I was attending a U.S. school. So like a lot of the U.S. faculty are going to be all like former U.S. government or people that are just kind of in more of a Western mindset, I guess. And so here to be able to see these other perspectives has been really eye-opening. And I think that would definitely set me apart as an applicant. Like even if I were to go back to the U.S., like having had this unique experience. So I think there's a lot of merit to
So it has been a very diverse learning environment here in the country, of course, then.
Yeah, of course. And also in terms of the student body is very diverse. And of course, majority Korean students, but there's lots of from other East Asian countries and other Southeast Asian countries. So yeah, that's been, enriched the environment quite a lot, I would say.
And staying with that, Soa, you are also German and you chose to take upon your college studies here in Korea. What was your experience like?
My experience, that's a good question. Actually, I always wanted to, have that real Korean experience because I've been born and raised in Germany, and I also really wanted to wear a school uniform in Korea. That's why I actually went to high school for just 1 year to have that experience, and then transferred to a Korean university. So, yeah, I mean, I can't compare German university to Korean university because I never went to a German university, but I have to say I had a good experience.
And talking about comparison then, Christopher, how does the learning experience here compared to the learning experience over in the US? Because you've been to university there and you're doing your master's degree here in the country.
Right. So I'd say one of the biggest differences in terms of the learning experience is that there's going to be a bit more of a lecture-based format in some of the classes. I would say it's not as stark of a contrast as I was expecting. Like, some people might have this perception that East Asian education is just this entire rote memorization lecture type thing, and I would say that's not true. Like a lot of the classes are seminar-based, and there's also discussions, and that's been great. But for sure, there are other classes where it's much more of a just listening and listening to a lecture type of an ordeal. So that's been the biggest thing. And then, of course, I think as a foreign student, yeah, it's always difficult to, have a sense of community a little bit. It can be a little difficult as a foreign student. Not everyone wants to communicate in English all the time. Even if they're very, very fluent in English, they don't necessarily want to speak English. So, yeah, that's something that has been something I've noticed. But of course, there's trade-offs. Like you can't have everything you want, and I'm very satisfied so far. So.
Right, that is good to know. Well, best of luck in your future endeavors, of course. And as Soa mentioned earlier, Christopher, hopefully in the near future we'll have you here as an analyst with regard to North Korean affairs then.
Well, I really hope so, yeah.
Right, and Soa, as always, thank you very much for your time today.
Anytime.
Yeah. Right, well, on that note, we end this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow, that is Thursday.